for Trudeau, since back to when the Prime Minister was John Deaton. And friends, because of these tax cuts, the real disposable income, the after inflation, after tax income of real families continues to rise in this country. And we are going to keep it rising with the innovative new tax-free savings account. The tax-free savings account is the biggest personal savings incentive since the creation of the RRSP half a century ago. Beginning January 1st, you will be able to pay into these plans. However the money is used, whenever the money is withdrawn, it will be free from the taxman forever. How do you like that? Now, friends, these are important gains for Canadians, but I want you to remember this, and I want you to remind your friends, your family, your colleagues, your neighbors of it. When we introduced these tax cuts, the opposition parties stood against them. They stood against, and they even voted against, every single tax reduction measure that this government has brought in. Cutting the GST, the Liberals were against it. Tax relief for families with children, they were against it. Tax relief for small businesses, they voted against it. Income splitting and every single measure to help senior citizens, they opposed those too. The list goes on and on and on. Now I tell you this because the Liberals are running around the country trying to tell people that if they were elected, they would cut some taxes. Friends, it goes against everything they have done in this Parliament. It goes against everything they believe in. There is only one way to cut taxes and keep them down and to keep taxes going down, and that is to keep this Conservative government in office. Now, friends, this leads me to the second of our critical priorities, protecting our environment and the health and well-being of Canadians. The latter, on the health and well-being. That's why we have made consumer safety a top priority after a couple of generations of neglect. We've pulled unsafe product off the shelves, we've tabled legislation to modernize Canada's product safety regulations, and we've moved to make sure the labels made in Canada and product of Canada actually mean what they say. And on the environment, we should not be shy about this. For the first time in a decade and a half, this country actually has an environmental policy. On global warming, for example, when Canada turns up now to international forums, we actually turn up with a plan. Going forward, it is one of the most aggressive plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on the planet. It will reverse the damage of the Dion years when Canada had one of the worst emissions records in the entire world. Our plan will compel every major industry in Canada to meet tough new emission standards, and it will lower Canada's emissions 20% by the year 2020. Now that's a real target. The same cannot be said for the alternative. Friends, Stéphane Dion's carbon tax doesn't even set a target for emissions reductions. Why not? Why not? Parce que la taxe sur le carbone des libéraux n'est pas une politique environnementale. C'est juste une augmentation de taxes déguisée en politique environnementale. Because the Dion carbon tax is not an environmental policy. It is just a tax increase disguised as an environmental policy. Now they're calling it the Green Shift. That's different than their original title, which I guess was Shift Happens. That was actually recorded. I didn't make that one up. It will shift taxes, all right, friends. It will shift taxes out of your pocket and into the federal government's. It will drive up the cost of everything: transportation, groceries, electricity, heating fuel, even propane for our barbecues. It will stop the economic progress of the middle class dead in its tracks, and it will make the cost of living unbearable for fixed-income seniors and low-income families. Friends, told our members this everywhere. This carbon tax has been the hidden agenda of the Liberal Party for years. Now that it is out in the open, we have got to fight it with everything we have. Simply put, we cannot let the Liberals take this country back to the tax and spend policies of the past. We cannot let them pit region against region. We cannot let them tell Canadians to freeze in the dark. The green shift is a green shaft. We will never let it happen to this country. Never. Now, friends, the third of our priorities is really the cornerstones of all successful societies: strong families and safe communities to raise them in. That's why our government has made cracking down on crime a major priority. Canadians have been growing more fearful for the safety of their families and their neighborhoods. What we are trying to do, friends, is to overhaul a system that has been going in the wrong direction for over 3 decades. Because we as conservatives understand that the purpose of a criminal justice system, the central purpose of a criminal justice system, is not the welfare of the criminal. It is the protection of law-abiding families and their property. Now, friends, once again, I want to remind you of the record here. You remember the last election, especially in the GTA. This was a big issue. And the other parties all said they were for cracking down on crime. Well, our MPs can tell you, when we got down to Ottawa and we put tough on crime legislation before Parliament, every time the media shut off their cameras, the opposition started blocking it. Every single time. We had to make our comprehensive, we had to package together our first bunch of tough on crime measures into one bill. We had to make it a confidence measure to get it through past the Liberals, the NDP, and the Bloc. But we did. We got it passed. And so we now have established mandatory prison sentences and tougher bail rules for offenders who commit crimes with firearms. We have instituted a higher age of protection to combat sexual predators. And we have made it easier to keep the country's most dangerous, violent, and repeat offenders behind bars where they belong forever. Now, friends, of course, there's work to do beyond strengthening ourselves here at home, strengthening our families and communities. There's also protecting Canada's sovereignty, restoring our status and influence in the world, and using it to stand up for freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. As conservatives, we understand that to have credibility on these things, a country must have a real capacity to contribute. That's why, for example, we've been reforming our foreign aid to make it more effective. And it's why we have launched the Canada First Defence Strategy, a comprehensive plan to rebuild the armed forces of this country. It is a big job after so many years of neglect. Our goal is to create a modern, flexible, combat-capable military that can properly defend our country, fulfill our obligations on continental defense, and contribute to security and humanitarian operations in the wider world. That means more troops, new and better equipment, and the financial support necessary to maintain an Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard equal to Canada's long and proud military base. We're going to use some of those assets to protect Canada's sovereignty in the Arctic. Our predecessors all but ignored our north, but we are putting boots